I'm with Ryan Arnold, that's part owner of a citrus orchard in South Australia called Pay Up Produce. And there's about 12 hectares of aphoras growing on the orchard, and we're in a block of aphoras that's grown under netting. And I'd like to ask Ryan, so historically, what type of pruning practices and yields have been getting in this orchard, and what have you changed to and why?
Yeah, this is a patch of Aphora mandarins on Citrange rootstock. They were 2005 plants, so these trees are around that 17 years old now, which is probably a relatively old patch of Aphora mandarins for the region. Traditionally, we manage these by probably yearly light hand pruning, taking the odd centre limb out as the trees were growing and trying to keep them managed in size. We struggled to sort of keep up just with hand pruning, so then we've employed saws and hedging over the seasons as well, so to bring the tops down and to bring the sides in. We found that these trees, I think the netting exacerbates it, but they were growing vigorously up towards the roof. And some seasons, if we had a light crop, we'd leave fruit up there, which became very hard to pick. A lot was missed and left. In this day and age, with the current issues we have in the riverland with fruit fly, that's a bit of a sink and a worry. And also we were finding with our management methods that we were getting really boom bust yields. So we would have a year of good yields where the trees were coming off a lighter crop and they'd throw a 60 tonne a hectare crop, and then we'd find the next year they'd overcropped and we had to hedge, so then the yield would crash down to 15 tonnes a hectare or less sometimes. We might have been averaging around 30 to 35 tonnes a hectare on average as we got to sort of year 13, 14, 15, and for the amount of, I suppose, effort and work we were putting into the patch, it just wasn't returning for us. So we had to make a decision on where we were going to head, and everything was on the table, chopping them right out, some really hard hedging ideas to renovate the trees. And then Steve gave me a call. I took Steve into this patch. I think the trees were like a jungle. There was no sunlight in between the trees. It felt like the sun was gone when you walked down the rows. The middles of the trees were just full of water shoots with no lateral growth on it, and then anything that was lateral was dead and sticky. They would only crop on the tops with any significant size because that's where the sun was hitting. Any fruit on the sides was generally small and wouldn't colour because there was no sunlight penetrating for it to colour. We had access issues with tractors. So getting sprays on timely was hard. Yeah, and then no pickers really wanted to come in here because the yield was light. It was hard to get because it was on the tops, and the fruit wasn't brilliant. So yeah, it wasn't easy to get pickers for the patch. So Steve had some theories and pruned a few trees, just looking to open them up a bit, get some light into the trees, try and when we do come in and prune, try and do it in a balanced way. But if we do that in an unbalanced way by hedging one side off or hedging the tops down low, we just find that regrowth from that point just powers back. So I think Steve came in with a theory of trying to take even the tree out. I suppose set the tree up with 4 main limbs. Let's try and open that structure out a little bit, and then come in with a mindset to manage the regrowth. And I saw a couple of trees he did it made sense and looked good, and I thought, I reckon you could go a bit harder. I think looking at what Steve was doing, and he did it with the industry in mind, and I suppose what was going to be achievable in mind, and we're still learning about the process. I sort of took it on myself. I grabbed 5 trees at the end of a row, and I thought, how would I do it, knowing that I've got a problem patch that I want to fix quicker. So yeah, I've taken 5 trees with Steve's theories, and I've probably times it by 200%. And the results are here with us now. I initially pruned around December, January, So January 22 was my first prune. With that first prune, I focused on taking big cuts out the center. These trees were touching the net up the top. I did have a hedger come in and hedge them down, and I used that as an opportunity then to reduce some of that weight of wood above, but then to try and reform the trees. So I took big cuts out the center to open the trees out and to structure the trees evenly with 4 to 5 main limbs. And I also, on those 4 or 5 main limbs, if I could see areas that they were going to crow's feet back up and shoot vertically from, I tried to chop them so to promote horizontal growth out of those tops, just to try and reduce the amount of apical dominance that was happening at those limbs. So also what I also looked at the sides of the trees, and I wanted to I suppose create some windows around as well. So I used the width of the tree to sort of define where I wanted to take a side limb out or shorten a side limb back, because that was then going to help me reduce the width of the tree to stop the row encroachment. So what we'd find under a heavy crop year, the trees would from the top come out into the center of the row, and also if we let them grow on the sides too far laterally, they would end out in the middles of the rows too. So they were two things I wanted to try and address. So keeping that top down means if I get fruit now even up those tops, if I can keep that height managed to similar to what we've got here, so probably around a 3 metre high tree, when they do load up, they're not going to come out to the center of the row. They're probably going to come out to the general skirt line, so I can still get tractor access for sprays, for picking. Similar with the sides, bring it in and open a window. I've got access for sprays, picking and thinning. So that was my theory. I wanted to open the tree out from the center, bring it down, but also look at the side of the tree and bring it in a little bit as well. So that main big prune was January 22. Yeah, so if we look at this tree now, there's a ladder sitting there. Everything that is on this tree at the moment, and even next year's flowering wood, we are going to be able to pick from this ladder. And my aim is to keep that managed ongoing at around that height. April 2023, so it's had its big prune in 2022, some water shoot management after that, and I have now gone through with another side prune this season just to take any other limbs that I thought looked a little bit out of balance, high or wide out, and I've just completed my fourth, I suppose, prune in 2 seasons of removing any vigorous water shoot growth that was going higher than I wanted it to do. What we're seeing here is now we've got a lot of light coming into this tree. You will find that in springtime this will fill up with water shoots and growth, but we come back once or twice a season with gloves and manage that by a quick hand pull out to thin it down. And then at this time of year, I find it's really easy to pick the bits that are taking off to the sky that are going to be the new vigorous wood. So it's a good time of year now. I can come in if that's shooting from down low, heading up, or shooting from a section here heading up, and there's no fruit on that. And if it's going to fruit next year, it's going to fruit at 4 or 5 metres. I'll take that out with hand snips now. So we are getting light into the centre of the tree. We've got some good balanced healthy wood in the centres of these trees. Light is penetrating, getting on that wood. It's produced, even with the first year's prune, it's produced enough carbohydrates to fruit inside the tree. I'd expect next year we'll have more fruit inside the tree with a second year and some a little bit older balanced wood inside the tree now. With the pruning, I feel that first prune was probably around $12 a tree. My January 23 prune late 22 prune that it did some saws. I think it was probably around the $10 a tree again. I probably did 4 reasonable saw cuts still and some water chute remanagement. So I think to get to this point here where I am now, which I think is quite balanced, and I've got some real strategy going forwards for ongoing management, I think it's probably going to cost me around $20 to $25 a tree to get to this point. Ongoing now, I've got my structure of the tree. I need to come in a couple times a season, and I'm still sort of learning, sucking and seeing, learning a bit what the best time is going to be. I think post-harvest is going to be a good time to come in, take any wide limbs out. If we want to make a small saw cut, it might only be a hand saw this time. Also to look at any wood that I've missed or might have had fruit on that then lifts back up that I think is going to be too high. So it's come down this year with the crop on it, but it's gone up and I go, well, I don't really want that flowering and setting. So I might come in and it might be a couple of snip cuts cut to branch to take that out. So I think that'll be a relatively quick run through. I'd say quite close post-harvest is my guess. Maybe $3 a tree, $3.50 a tree. And then I think we'll aim to come through once to twice through the season at $1.50 a tree to manage the regrowth and snip any big long suckers out. My gut feel, I think ongoing, somewhere in the realms of $5 to $7 a tree. I'm hoping that we can keep these trees managed and balanced going forward now. So you can see with all this light in the tree now, and we've got some fruit inside the tree, the big problem I was having, especially on the shady side of the tree, was colouring of the fruit. With this light in here now and the light penetration and the openness, we really are going to get a lot better and more even colouring of the fruit. That's going to mean an earlier harvest time, hopefully. We might be able to hit market windows that are favourable rather than having to wait for the fruit to colour up to be able to come through and pick. And also there was significant wastage with our colour as well. So with the amount of green that we were having at harvest time. Just doing some numbers on it, looking at what we started with. We're starting with a patch that's boom and bust, average 35 tonnes a hectare. Probably finding that even in those boom years, when you have a boom crop, the fruit's small. So the dollars per tonne on average is probably down too than what you'd expect with a nice balanced crop. So we're looking at, and I think looking at the trees I've got here now, I've already got just season 2, 45 tonnes a hectare to 50 tonnes a hectare on these 5 trees equivalent. So that gives me confidence that I think going forward we can improve on that as I form the shape of the tree and create wood where I need it. So for this patch, if I can then take this from a 35 tonne a hectare average yield and get it into a consistent yield of around 55 tonnes a hectare, I'm increasing 20 tonnes a hectare, my yield for the patch. And at $800 a tonne, 20 tonnes a hectare equates to a return of around $30 a tree better than if I was at 35 tonnes a hectare. And even if that yield's only a 10 tonne a hectare benefit, we're at 45 consistently, I'm still $14 a tree better off with these trees cropping at 45 tonnes a hectare than I am with them at 35 tonnes a hectare. And my ongoing cost I feel is in that $5 to $7 range, so we're well above a return on investment. I'd just really like to thank Steve from the New South Wales DPI and Hort Innovation for ringing me and bringing this project idea out here. If it wasn't for projects like this, I might have given up on this patch and pushed it out. Now we're really enthused, keen to get in and manage our trees and try and get longer out of our investment. Without these projects happening on farm with growers and giving us a really tangible involvement in the projects as well, it's really hard to to get the message out, and I think it's imperative that growers are involved and guys like Steve come out and share their knowledge with us and put the research on the farms. It's great for industry.